Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa. These are your headlines on the continent tonight. Activists in the Democratic Republic of Congo commemorate the victims of the deadly six-day war. 21 years ago, Ugandan and Rwandan troops fought in the city of Kisangani. A group of Cameroonian women asked the United Nations to put the Anglophone crisis high on its agenda. More than 760,000 people have been displaced in the conflict between armed separatists and government forces. And as we approach World Environment Day, we bring you a report from Sudan, where conservationists disagree with villagers living near the country's biggest wildlife park. Now, let's start the show in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Saturday marks 21 years since the start of the six-day war in the northeastern city of Kisangani. On June 5, 2000, fighting erupted between Ugandan and Rwandan troops who each backed opposite rebel groups during the Second Congo War. The largely forgotten conflict left 1,000 people dead and more than 3,000 wounded. A group of activists is fighting to keep the memory of those victims alive. Clément Bonnereau and Juliette Dubois report.
The city of Kisangani suffered the most during the two Congo wars, especially in early June 2000, when during fighting between the Rwandan and Ugandan armies, some 6,000 mortar shells fell on the city, according to the UN, in the space of just 6 days. Hundreds of houses like this one were destroyed. We spoke to a resident who was lucky enough to survive.
Il y avait eu une bombe qui était venue toucher juste à ma maison, foudroyer avec toute ma famille. Il y a eu des éclats, moi-même j'ai eu des éclats, et puis les enfants aussi et ma femme. J'ai perdu l'œil ici, je ne vois plus correctement. Vous voyez ici, je ne vois personne.
Wounds are still raw in Kisangani, yet to this day there isn't a single memorial site to remember the victims, except for this cemetery, which, as you can see, is almost abandoned. A civil society group called Ukumbusho, which means remembrance in Swahili, is trying to change that. This year, for the first time, its members have organised a series of debates and live performances to commemorate the six-day war.
21 ans après, il n'y a rien qui est de concret qui s'est fait, et de manière organisée et de manière officielle. Ce qui s'est passé, c'était très atroce et c'était inhumain, dégradant. Alors nous ne voulons pas que ça se répète encore, raison pour laquelle nous sommes obligés de se souvenir de ça, d'immortaliser pour que ces genre d'événements ne reviennent plus jamais.
21 years later, survivors are still waiting for justice and reparation. In 2005, the International Court of Justice condemned the Ugandan state for crimes committed in the eastern DRC. Rwanda, meanwhile, has never been prosecuted because the state does not recognise the court's jurisdiction.
Mali's M5 movement has celebrated the one-year anniversary of its creation with a rally in Bamako. The opposition force used to have fraught ties with the military, one that has since improved. Coup leader Colonel Assimi Goïta is reportedly considering an M5 figure for a top position in the transitional government. Observers say such a move could soften international criticism. France, for one, is a vocal critic of Mali's second coup in 9 months. Friday, Paris suspended military cooperation with the African state as warned. To Cameroon next, where a group of women leaders has written to the United Nations Security Council. They're asking for the global body to place the Anglophone crisis high on its agenda. The women say international pressure could help put an end to the conflict. Armed separatists and government forces have been fighting for almost 5 years now. Violence that has pushed more than 760,000 people to flee from their homes. France 24's Regina Sondo has more.
The letter was written 4 days ahead of a high-level UN security meeting. Cameroonian politician Kawala spoke to us, and she said the intention of the letter was to get the United Nations to intervene in the crisis by communicating with the Cameroonian government now.
To the UN Security Council, we have said, we do not want to be the next peacekeeping mission. We don't want to see blue helmets in Cameroon. So the Security Council should act now using its power of communication, because it has a lot of power in its communication. It has yet, after 5 years, the Security Council has not yet communicated to Cameroon recommending dialogue, inclusive, bottom-up dialogue with all the actors at the table. The Security Council has not recommended simple actions which can de-escalate tensions in Cameroon.
In the restive English-speaking regions of Cameroon, warring parties have not listened to the United Nations call for an end to the ongoing war amid the coronavirus pandemic. It is worth noting that Cameroon is the second worst, most displaced crisis according to the Norwegian Refugee Council's annual list. They say it is due to lack of acute finance, overwhelmed needs, and media neglect, as well as diplomatic neglect.
In Ghana, a group of LGBTQ activists are set to spend 4 more days in detention. This as a court delayed a ruling for their bail request. The 21 activists were arrested 2 weeks ago on charges of alleged unlawful gathering. Their lawyer says they simply attended a workshop on LGBTQ rights. Sexual minorities frequently face abuse, attacks and discrimination in Ghana, a country where gay sex remains illegal.
Colleagues and people within the community who have been unjustifiably arrested and held for not breaking the law or for not doing anything that contravenes the law in any way or form. And so we have been here expecting that they would be released or at least granted bail and heard. But that has not been the case. And it's really sad to see the justice system played with in this way.
Nigeria's government says it has indefinitely suspended Twitter in the country. The announcement comes 2 days after the social media giant removed a post by the president for violating its abusive behavior policy. In it, Muhammadu Buhari had threatened to punish regional secessionists. On Friday, the website and the app was still functioning in Abuja and Lagos, with some users ironically commenting that the government announced the Twitter suspension on Twitter. To South Africa next, where researchers are injecting rhino horns with radioactive materials. It's a part of a study that aims to curb the illegal horn trade. Many ports worldwide have scanners that detect radioactive materials, and researchers hope that this technique could curb poaching. Nick Rushworth tells us more.
It could be a new approach to deterring rhino poachers and smugglers. South African researchers are injecting small quantities of radioactive isotopes into rhino horns that would make the horns detectable. Despite a 30% decline in rhino poaching last year due to COVID restrictions, poachers still killed nearly 400 rhinos for their horns in South Africa.
It will devalue the rhino horn in the eyes of the end user, the person who's kind of buying it in the Far East. Because if we make it radioactive, people are going to be less inclined to want to own something like that.
Rhino horn is in demand in Asia because it's believed to have medicinal properties. Rhino poaching involves local poachers and international crime syndicates.
It makes it a lot easier to track a horn if it's been taken from the animal and a smuggler is now trying to move it across international borders, because there's something like between 10 and 11,000 installed radiation monitors at various different ports, airports, border crossings.
Russia's nuclear agency Rosatom is funding the research. Tests over 3 months will see how the rhinos cope in terms of their behavior and health. If the study is successful, it could offer an alternative to the current practice of dehorning rhinos to prevent poaching.
And finally, we end the show in Sudan. Dinda National Park stretches over 10,000 square kilometers. It's the country's biggest park and also boasts the most diverse wildlife. Some people living in nearby villages, though, say it doesn't need to be that big and would like to use some of the land for agriculture. Conservationists, though, disagree.
Sudan's Dinda National Park is a haven for wildlife. Vast grasslands, lakes, and woods are spread over more than 10,000 square kilometers, making it an important flyaway for migratory birds. But the massive reserve is under threat. The population has exploded, putting the pressure for new croplands on this area tucked away by the Ethiopian border, 400 kilometers from capital Khartoum. Cattle herders pass into the park for pasture, their traditional grazing lands plowed up. They say regulations are far too strict.
We are from the village of Maikarato, and they gave us 5 square kilometers for traditional agriculture. But it is too small for us. We need more.
When the park was first protected in 1935, there were few people in the surrounding areas. This has now changed. Their solution would be to move the villages to areas that fit their needs.
In recent years, the Dinder Park has been exploited through aggressive cultivation, logging, and hunting.
But driven by hunger, some villagers defy all the bans. Sometimes they even set fires to drive out bees and harvest wild honey. Rangers can give out heavy fines to rule breakers, who also face up to 6 months in prison. For now, that has worked. But as humans continue to encroach on the land, it's unclear how much longer buffaloes, gazelles, lions, and hyenas will roam the Dinder National Park.
That's all from the Eye on Africa team. Julia Kim is up next with all your international news.